the secret sauce of like it working was the brilliance behind bringing the jingle back. You know, I mentioned like consolidating brands to Nationwide. It has one of the most recognizable jingles, and Nationwide is on your side. It was in the advertising for a lot of years, but it wasn't the central focus of the advertising. And so when Peyton came back, I mean, that was the bringing back of the jingle. So it wasn't just, we're now in the NFL, we have Peyton Manning. It was bring back this jingle that millions of people love.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Insurance Growth Lab. Today's guest, we've got Brad Barnett. If you're not familiar with Brad, he's an independent consultant. He's the former VP of Enterprise Marketing at Nationwide. Brad had a really interesting time at Nationwide. He managed over $300 million in annual media spend and had over a $50 million portfolio of sports and entertainment and talent. That's a huge budget and portfolio. We dove into all things NFL, Peyton Manning, went into the behind the scenes on how these things really come together.
Nationwide is very much a brand with heart. It does a lot in the community. It's given hundreds of millions of dollars to Nationwide Children's Hospital. And it is the core. It's part of the culture and identity of that brand. And so one of the ways in which we said was an opportunity for us to activate that became the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. And so this was a chance for us to do further differentiation of the fact that Nationwide is this brand that cares. And that became a whole campaign in of itself.
When you think of how long that campaign has ran and is continuing to run, it's super impressive. So this is going to be a great episode for anybody that either just finds that really interesting and wants to know how these things come to fruition, as well as those people that are kicking off these big partnerships with groups like the NFL, F1, and any of these other major names that are front and center. So with that, I hope you enjoy the episode, and let's get to the show. Brad, I'm super excited that we can get this on the books, for one.
Yeah.
And then two,
Took some doing.
It did take some doing. And I'm super excited to ask this first question. When you hear the word crowd pleasers, what does that mean to you?
It'd be interesting if you asked other people what their answer would be. Here's what it means to me. So one of the things that people know about me is I have probably too much of an affinity towards karaoke.
Too much.
Yeah. Now, here's the deal. I've tried to kind of pare it back because I felt like, if you're hanging out with people, I feel like people would know that I would want to do it. Yeah. And then they would do it. So now I'm just like, I need to take a step back on this thing. I like it too much. So I don't really know why. I've always loved music, and I'm not a great singer. Like if I could do one thing, I'd probably rap would be the best thing I could do. But
another fun fact.
It doesn't hold me back from trying to sing is what I would say. But your joke, like I keep songs saved on my phone just in case the time comes up to go sing something. Crowd pleasers are the ones where it is going to slay.
What?
Everyone in there is going to be up. So it's going to be like your Sweet Carolines, your Bon Jovis, the thing that, what's the Billy Joel one? I can't even think about it right now. Piano Man. Everyone knows Piano Man. So it's like the ones where, nothing kills the vibe more in karaoke when someone goes up, sings some obscure song that only they know and nobody else knows.
Yeah, or like Evanescence.
Right. Exactly.
Not an easy one to karaoke.
Right. So if you're going to go in there, guaranteed success is sing a crowd pleaser. Here's what I always tell people, though. It's like marketing. You got to go in and you do a quick segmentation of like, what's the audience? Yeah. Is it a country audience? Is it an R&B audience? Is it a rap audience?
Yeah.
Because then you try and tailor the song to that. Too much thinking has gone into this.
Well, maybe. Maybe. We'll see how much of your career has been attributed to this. So, and it might be just the right amount of thinking. So a little bit of backstory for the audience. This came up at one of the dinners that you host. You host a dinner of marketing executives and other executives just in town. And when you pulled out the phone, I was like, whoa. He was like, I've got them categorized. I'm like, okay. And that's where crowd pleasers came up. And I was like, that is actually genius. Now, my favorite part about all of this was when you said, because as we'll talk about, you had a long career at Nationwide, managed over a $300 million annual media budget. When somebody manages an over $300 million annual media budget, the agencies are going to take notice.
Yeah, right.
And
Exactly. Yeah.
What happened when the agencies took notice of the fact that you loved karaoke?
I mean, that's always a thing because, if you're in marketing, like your agency partners are like connected at your hip.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
If you run your agencies the right way, they're in your meetings. It is not a vendor relationship; it's a partnership, and anything naturally happens where you have dinners, you have events, and that kind of thing. And so that was probably one of those times where I could tell, like, okay, the agencies know. So we've got to stop doing this because we don't need to do any more like, group building, team bonding, karaoke kind of things anymore because I know that not everybody likes that. So, but yeah, you got to watch out because the agency folks they find out they're gonna go after it.
Oh, it would be my first instinct.
Yeah.
I would do it like that.
Yeah.
Like that's probably all we would do.
Yeah.
So I think it's also good feedback coming from. It's like, okay, well, maybe pump the brakes on
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah, know yourself a little bit. Have some awareness, right? That's what you tell people. Have some awareness.
So to transition a little bit, you spent 20 years at Nationwide. Had I think 9 different promotions while you were at Nationwide. Started on the product side.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm curious about is how much did starting out on the product side help you when you transitioned to the marketing side?
I actually tell people it's not that I intentionally had that journey in mind. I mean, my career is kind of like a little bit of a squiggly line. It was not just bottom left to upper right. It kind of ended up that way, but I was someone who kind of wanted depth, so I would take laterals in certain situations. I mean, not to go too far into my backstory, but like I went to undergrad for management information systems. So it was a very technology focused degree. And I was that kid who went to undergrad, not exactly sure what he wanted to do, sitting behind the desk and figuring out like, okay, well, technology, cybersecurity, going to be kind of important in the future. Maybe I should go this route.
Yeah.
Not that I hated it at all. I was pretty good at it. But when I finished it, I was like, I just don't want to sit behind a desk and code. I just didn't feel like that was really bringing pure enjoyment out for me. What I didn't know at the time was like having a technology foundation helps in almost any job that you're going to be in. But anyways, my passion became like, I want to get inside of a big company, find something I'm really good at, passionate about, and hopefully that can kind of like grow into what I do with my career. And Nationwide became that. Nationwide's a fantastic Fortune 100 company. It's one of those places, I just mentioned kind of that career. You can only do that in certain companies where there's
100%.
that much variability to go do different things. And it was honestly one of the biggest things that kept me there for 20 years was I never felt like I was dying. It was always like you were growing, being stretched, being tapped, working on new things. And I credit, when I made the transition to marketing, I credit being good at marketing earlier because of the product knowledge I gained. Not to jump ahead, but like, I think one of the biggest things marketers should be good at is understanding the business. Like every business that you work on, especially like at Nationwide, I worked on about every business unit at one point. They're so different. They're so nuanced. How they make money is different. Their customers are different. Their distribution is different. If you want to be an effective person at the table across leadership, if you want to be somebody that they seek out your opinion, you have to know their business in some way. And so I got real, I understood pricing strategies and how we made money and how to actually develop products and roll them out across 50 different states. And I got really good at that and then made the leap to marketing. But I do credit kind of early on in marketing being good at that because of the background that I had gained in product.
I 100% believe that. And I hear that all the time from people that ended up in executives. They're like, well, spend time in product, spend time in claims. Yeah. And it makes complete sense. I was fortunate. I started out as an agent and I became an agent.
Yeah, I've heard that path too.
Oh, I tell people within insurtech companies in particular, right? Because insurtechs will come in oftentimes and like they've got a great product. It's really interesting, but they haven't spent any time within an agency. So it's like, and they'll say, what's your opinion on this? Like, it's a super interesting product. Like you've got a really advanced technology that'll never work in an agency.
Yeah.
Like if you just, like if you go in there.
You don't have that connection for sure.
Yeah. Like if you don't spend time in that agency to see the workflows and like how do they operate on a day to day, forget it. Because and it's not that it can't happen at some point. It's just, you're going to try to force a round peg into a square hole. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. So I love that. I could totally empathize with that. What do you think was one of the biggest contributors to that success? Was that that you had this broad experience, you had this business experience, can talk about multiple different lines? Because I saw you. I mean, you were on the commercial side, personal line side. Like you did a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you attribute that to?
You know, here's what I'd say. First of all, my goal aspirationally, career-wise, has always been to be a CMO. And you know, Nationwide I've worked with a lot of great Nationwide CMOs: Jim Liskey, Matt Jockus, Terrence Williams, Ramon Jones, Ann Bear, who's the CMO there now, fantastic leader. And you know, who knows if who knows if I'll ever achieve that? I don't know. But I do think one of the intentional things that I've tried to do is, if I could ever get to that point to be a CMO, is I wanted to be able to be in the shoes of so many people discipline-wise around marketing. So I wanted to understand media and social media and marketing operations and brand strategy and segmentation. I didn't want to just be this one vertical person, because I felt like to get to CMO, you better have a grasp of how marketing as a discipline works. And so, you know, I tried to get depth at a lot of different things so that if I ever did make it there, and who knows if that'll ever happen, that I would have a grasp of being able to sit around the table and say, I understand how this all works, you know? And so it was a very intentional strategy to try and get really good at all the disciplines that make up marketing.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, because we all know the leaders that go into those positions and they haven't, and it's not to say like, you know, I think you can be an executive and not necessarily did the role as an individual contributor and still be very effective.
For sure.
Many people are just natural born, very good executives. That said, it's always very clear, and you're going to trust the person that you know that has been there more, because they're usually something usually comes up where it's, oh, wait, I know, like what you just said just proved that you know that this is impossible.
Yeah,
almost similar to what we were just talking about. It's like, we know that it'll never work for XYZ reason. And then sometimes, you know, it is nice having fresh blood in there, because they're like, oh, maybe this will work because we're so jaded.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even I'm talking more marketing disciplines too, but you mentioned this too. Like, I had a chance to go and experience a lot of different businesses. And they're not all easy to learn either. I mean, I remember the first time I started leading our farm and ranch and commercial agribusiness. Like, I didn't grow up on a farm, didn't understand farming, you know, and my way of immersing myself in there was, I'm going to farm trade shows and I'm sitting there across the desk from farmers. And, you know, at the time, you know, you probably know this about Nationwide, deep-rooted farm and agriculture heritage.
Absolutely.
You know,
started from the farm bureau.
I remember one time, like, I messed up the difference of a beef cow and a dairy cow in some sort of creative, and one of our board members saw that. I remember like making that mistake, and then it turned into a funny discussion with a board member. But like, when you put yourself in those different situations where you're learning, like you're gonna mess some things up as you learn and get better. But that was another thing that I was helpful for me in terms of, I think, gaining credibility and getting better as a marketer, was that I had gotten the chance to experience a lot of different businesses along the way.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So, okay, I want to jump into the weeds.
Yeah.
And talk about the main topic that we'll probably talk about, and that's NFL, Peyton Manning. I want to break all this down. Where did it all start?
I had a chance to be in the role at the right time when the category was exploding in spend, when it was trying to be in the haves versus the have-nots of being a relevant brand to hundreds of millions of people. But to get anything done inside of that company, it takes lots of people to do that. And so Jim McCoy is on the sports marketing team, is one of the best sports marketing guys that exists in the industry.
Yeah.
He was very hands-on in this. Rick Jackson, creative genius, did a lot of the advertising. And so I don't want to ever portray it as like the guy. Like, there were lots of people that got a chance to kind of do this. But you have to kind of rewind a little bit and say, where were we as a category at that time? And, so call it 2012, 13, 14, the direct-to-consumer spend was exploding. I think it reached about $9 billion at one point. The Geicos and Progressives of the world were starting to gain even more traction than they already had. And
we're very much in their own right.
Yeah, and they're spending $1.5 billion to $2 billion. There's a ton of economic disparity in kind of like the legacy brands. So call them the State Farms, the Allstates, the Nationwides, where you've got massive distribution and your expense structure is different. And you have Progressive and Geico, whose expense structure is much cheaper and they can afford significantly more advertising. And so you're competing against each other, but the businesses are comprised differently, and how much you can afford to spend changes, right? And matters.
So real quick, is that because Geico's all direct to consumer, and then and Progressive direct to consumer, but independent agency force?
They've clearly evolved too, but their cost structure is just different. Yeah. And so, they've been able to afford more spend to drive more of their direct to consumer business. And so, for us, we weren't spending $1 billion, $1.5 billion. And, if you're trying to find the way in which you can get relevant, like we knew at the time live sports was like one of the last bastions of being able to get attention.
Sure.
And that was even at the time where the digital capabilities that exist today really weren't happening at that time, but you could see that they were going to.
Yeah.
However many millions of messages people get throughout a certain time frame, we knew was going to happen. And so we wanted to be able to find opportunities to have stopping power with them, and we knew live sports was going to be kind of a mechanism to do that. And so if that's where you want to head as a brand, you're trying to find the right places to do that. The NFL is not a secret. If you look at like the top 100 shows that are viewed, I think like 80 of them are NFL games.
It's not even close.
Probably even higher than that. I can't remember. But it's the place in which still captivates millions and millions of people every single weekend. And so that became a focus of ours. And now there was you can take a couple of different approaches when you do this. Like, do you want to just advertise in the game, or do you want to form a relationship with the NFL in some ways? And by forming a relationship means you're getting an actual category sponsorship with them in some way. And so we went back and forth on what's the right approach for us. And
what was that debate? What did that look like? Like, what were the pros and cons?
The main pros that we found was anytime that you have an official partnership with the NFL, it opens up so many opportunities in media for logo exposure, for brand exposure. It opens up more opportunities, especially if you're in a category where building relationships with distribution partners matters, and obviously this does. It opens up more access and opportunities for you to create the types of experiences that people want to come to. And so as we kind of went back and forth, I forgot this. The third thing was you also have to know the identity and culture of your brand too. Nationwide is very much a brand with heart. It does a lot in the community. It's given hundreds of millions of dollars to Nationwide Children's Hospital. And it is the core. It's part of the culture and identity of that brand. And so one of the ways in which we said was an opportunity for us to activate that became the Walter Peyton Man of the Year award. And so this was a chance for us to do further differentiation of the fact that Nationwide is this brand that cares. And that became a whole campaign in of itself. And so you can't do that unless you have a relationship with the NFL.
Yep.
So we went through that path. We felt like that was the best approach for us. There was a category sponsor already there in USAA. And so one of the things that we had to do was go pitch to the NFL and say, can we split the category? Can we find a space where both of us can coexist? Because USAA serves a very niche audience. Nationwide serves more of a main street mass audience.
Absolutely.
And so that became a path for us to kind of pursue, and we found a way to coexist together. USA is a tremendous brand and got really good teams there, and we co-worked and co-created together in many different ways. But that opened up the door for us to become a sponsor. So that we found a path in to the NFL. That became the way in which we could have an official relationship. But anytime you do a sponsorship, like, you are dead on arrival unless you have a way in which you're going to activate it in some ways. And so if your entire spend is just based on rights and everything else, the working spend of what actually gets exposed to people, which drives brand preference and brand differentiation and who you are, that's your advertising, that's your media, it's your entire kind of like surround sound approach to the sport. And so we knew that we had to align media assets, we had to align creative assets in this sport.
Yep.
So then the next part is like, so what does that look like?
I was going to say,
what's the media strategy looks like? What's the creative strategy look like? And so then you head down a path of creative approach, but also talent inside of that too.
Did you align the entire strategy to this?
I mean, there were parts. There's certainly parts outside of that, but when you look at like what's the lion's share of focus, because again, you only get so many at bats with people at the enterprise level, and I should kind of reinforce that. I'm talking kind of enterprise level. Inside of a company like Nationwide, you have very specific annuity strategies, retirement plan strategies, life insurance, auto. Like within those businesses, there are plans that are being activated on a daily basis. When you think about the brand at the enterprise level, one brand, which is actually a change that took place kind of during this too, as we went to one brand and nationwide, and the NFL became kind of a way in which to communicate that too. This was a huge pillar in being able to kind of pull that off. And so, you head down this path of what's the right creative approach and who's the right talent, and Peyton became kind of like the top person that you wanted to go after.
Why was that?
I mean, his every score you look at in terms of talent, he just crushes it. Like his Q scores are good, his likability is good. He's one of those people that cuts across red and blue evenly. He's liked almost by everybody.
Can you break down those Q score likability? Like what are those, and how do you actually measure that?
Yeah, I mean, at a highest level, like Q scores are helping you assess, like, is this the kind of person that your audience would actually like in some way? You have people with really high Q scores, you have people with really low Q scores, and so you're kind of using that not as the only way, not as the only mechanism, but certainly a big one to say, like, if I put this person in an ad, is it going to do well or not?
Yeah.
And so, we use that for, we've worked with Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Alex Morgan, and even more broadly in some of the nationwide advertising, when you started to activate music, you had Leslie Odom Jr. and Rachel Platten, and Brad Paisley and others. And so they all go through this kind of vetting process. Yeah. And the Q score is just one of many things that you kind of look at. But it's at its core, it's getting at, like, that's this aspect of, is the audience going to like this person or not? Is their awareness high? Do people know them in some ways? Because, you don't want the advertising to have to be the way in which you're building the talent's awareness in some ways. Hopefully you're drafting off of their existing awareness, so to speak. And so we through all that analysis, kind of gravitate towards Peyton, and, who we think that he's going to be somebody that will do really well with this audience, do really well. He's still an active player at the time, keeping that in mind. Goes on to win a Super Bowl at the same time too, which is great. Obviously fades off into the sunset. But Peyton became the person, and then you start working that part of, like, how do you do the deal? Does he want to work with us at all? Does he want to get an insurance? And this was before, Peyton, the joke with Peyton is that he kind of advertises a lot, right?
Yeah, sure.
And he makes this joke about himself too. And I'm not sure if he ever saw himself in insurance, but he certainly has made a huge,
I'd say so, yeah.
A huge dent. I mean, the relationship started in 2014. It just hit 10 years a year ago. And so it's one of those things that, the team, and I give credit to the group there, especially from an advertising perspective, of reimagining something every single year.
Yeah.
Because, listen, one of the main parts, and it wasn't just Peyton, like the way in which it all came together, you have the sponsorship, you align your media assets to regular season games and conference championships, the Super Bowl, et cetera. The real crux of, the secret sauce of, like, it working was the brilliance behind bringing the jingle back. I mentioned, like, consolidating brands to nationwide. It has one of the most recognizable jingles, and nationwide is on your side. And it was in the advertising for a lot of years, but it wasn't the central focus of the advertising. And so when Peyton came back, that was the bringing back of the jingle. Yeah. So it wasn't just, we're now in the NFL, we have Peyton Manning. It was bring back this jingle that millions of people love. And, very famously, the ad that was launched was the chicken parm you taste so good ad. And so now you have something, and you can tell, like, it's going to be something. Because you can see it showing up in all of your user-generated content. It's showing up in things like Jeopardy. It's showing up in Saturday Night Live as a joke. We took the concept of chicken parm and started doing chicken parm sandwiches at Denver Broncos games. Pizza places started selling chicken parm pizzas. Like, it was one of those things that just kind of, like, caught on fire. Yeah. And Peyton, it got so much that Peyton kind of jokes, like, he's like, I'd go out to dinner and people would just, like, jingle to me. He's like, the waiter would come up and be like, sing and jingle, like, what would you like tonight? And so it became, this fire that really just caught, and it helped accelerate the brand. We achieved unaided awareness scores that were the highest in the company's 100-year history. And so you were getting the results too. It wasn't just doing cool things. It was it actually performing in market in a certain way. And we were getting the brand scores that we'd always kind of desired.
So, one of the things that I'm curious about is, am I wrong? But this was probably a pretty big swing because this had to have ate up a good amount of the budget. When it comes to, the sponsorship alone, probably gigantic. So you got the sponsorship, and you have all of the creative assets that are going to go towards actually executing on the said sponsorship. And, if you're putting all that money there, you're not putting money in other places where at this point, Geico and Progressive are pretty much ubiquitous. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
You couldn't, or omnipresent, I should say. Am I right on that? This was a pretty big swing?
It was a strategic bet. Yeah. It was a strategic bet that being in this place. Now, keep in mind, too, it's not like it's a one-night thing. Like being in the NFL gives you August to February of relevancy.
Yeah.
So like it's not like you're dumping all of your money in like a 2-month time frame.
Yep. You got the draft.
You've got lots of pillars throughout the plan that you can activate the brand and show up in a meaningful way. And so it's not like it was strategic in terms of like you are making sure the investment is sufficient to kind of capture what you need, but it wasn't like you were taking the bet where we need to get it all in a certain very constrained time frame. But listen, it was like you have to sell it in. Like this is one of those things that like you're talking to the CEO about, you're talking to the board members about. You want to make sure everyone is behind this strategy. When you show up that visible in those platforms, you got to keep in mind like they're all watching, all their friends are watching. The last thing you want to have happen is that the brand shows up in a way that not everyone was prepared for.
Yeah.
And so it's certainly like you have to make sure you're communicating very well across the C-suite and the board to kind of roll out a strategy like that.
Was there pushback on that?
I don't recall any like, this is crazy type of pushback. I mean, anytime that you're in a business, it's always like, well, how much does stuff cost? And so you have to be very structured on what's a return on investment look like. I mean, we have marketing mix modeling that tells us how many customers you're driving. We do ROI at a sponsorship level that says like, how valuable is the sponsorship and are we getting more out of it than we're putting into it? And so you have to be really, and that's just marketing 101,
Sure.
So hopefully you're coming to the table with like really good data and facts that says, what is it driving to the business? And then you just got to go do it. But then you have to have a reporting loop back that says like, how's it performing and is it doing it the way we thought it would? And so, I think any marketer, all of our CMOs control that very well in terms of making sure that, everybody at like the appropriate levels, and especially like, all jokes aside, the CFO has to be completely aligned to this. I always tell marketers like, you're much more successful when you make friends across the aisle, especially with finance. And the more that you can do that and the more that you can get alignment, the easier things are going to be.
Yep.
But it's always about the numbers, right? You want to make sure you're investing in things that are actually driving results.
So one of the things I want to talk about on this, so you mentioned a word specifically, unaided. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but unaided is when this is your direct to consumer.
Yeah.
Somebody saw the commercial and they're going straight to nationwide. That's the audience.
Yep.
And aided is if an example would be if they go through an agent or broker or
some sort of
financial
intermediation
advisor
happens. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're referring to it and then it comes out. I want to talk about that a little bit because here's something I found pretty interesting was you gave the talk at the ANA about the NFL relationship, and which is a great talk. I highly recommend it. It's on Brad's LinkedIn if you want to check that out. What I found really interesting was, and I would not have guessed this, I mean, makes perfect sense in hindsight, and you touched on this a little bit, was the impact that those events that you could bring any of these intermediaries to ended up being like one of the biggest parts. Is that right?
It is. If it's okay, let me back up a little bit and say kind of how we got there.
Yeah.
So, I've kind of lived on both sides of the strategy where it was very direct to consumer, and then a pivot happens, and it became more about how do we drive more business through all of our millions of distribution partners, our thousands of distribution partners, and so. One of the ways in which we made that pivot at that time was how do you build experiences that the partners who sell our products to their customers want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, listen, there's a lot of like entertaining that happens because you want to create something that people want to come to.
100%.
But the most interesting thing is where most of the value and the positive feedback came was the business partners, the people who are the president of the business and their lieutenants are also there. And so you're creating this mechanism of people who sell and the key leaders inside of your company to kind of like build those relationships, ask hard questions. We would have town halls and forums so that you could conduct the right business meetings too. But that was a huge lever to creating incremental growth inside of a kind of a B2B distribution model, which is how do you create the right kinds of experiences that people can come to, you can build relationships, and then hopefully it leads to, more relationships and revenue opportunities kind of down the road. But it's, if you're in sales and you're in this kind of aspect, like there's so many touch points that happens. You're trying to get in the door of an agency, or maybe you're in the door of an agency and you're trying to grow the relationship in some ways, or maybe you've already done that and they do a tremendous job for you and you want to make sure that they know you're grateful for that. All those steps are kind of important to why these events, and I hate to even use the word events because I feel like that minimizes it in some ways because there's so many tentacles to the experience and the people that are behind the scenes making this happen.
Can you break that down? Like, what does one of these experiences look like?
I mean, teams are preparing many months in advance of this. And that's not just the experience, but you're locking down locations, you're locking down hotels, you're locking down, air logistics, you're locking everything down in advance. And so it takes a commitment and it takes planning to do that. And you're doing research like, is this a place people want to come to? Now, if it's within the NFL aspect of it, you kind of already have a good blueprint of like the draft, the Super Bowl, championships, but also because of the fact that regular season is so good, even just the 16, 17 regular season games, people will gravitate towards that as an asset to drive business. And so you're planning months in advance. So that the big stuff takes even longer, as you might imagine. But then you have to align. Okay, great, we're doing this. The salespeople have to make sure the right people can come.
Sure.
Sales will tell you like they can probably get anybody to come to these things, but they want to get the right level of person inside of an agency or a broker to be there, so that. Because again, you want to leave with a great relationship so that more can happen after that. If you don't get to the right person, sometimes that might not happen. But, the events became a critical part in a B2B model to building relationships with distribution partners to sell more.
So you're at the event. Let's walk us through. What kind of tickets are these? Are we talking 50-yard line row?
It depends. Like for regular season games, and the team's very smart about costs. Like some of these suites can get insane.
Yeah.
For example, like if you're hosting somebody at the Super Bowl, we never use the suite at the Super Bowl. Like it's just way too expensive. And so we would use other strategic ways in which you can get 4 to 6 tickets together and and insert like a host into the 4 to 6.
Yep.
And so you're really smart about where people sit. Like, of course you want to give them good seats because they're coming here to participate in some ways. And so you want the experience to be good. And one of the things that, we got really good at is like we always talked to them afterwards and we assessed ourselves and we got scores and we would hear them and say, this was good, this wasn't. We'd make changes in the next year. And so even like the client and customer satisfaction of the event itself was measured to know like what to make better in future years. But like every game's different. Like conference championships and Super Bowls are obviously going to be more expensive, more highly sought after, and you got to be smarter about the way you use money. Regular season, maybe you could get a suite night in there because that's a little bit more economically viable. But you can get a lot done with just doing regular seats.
Oh,
too.
100%.
Yeah. Because there's the game, but there's all the stuff that happens around the game too, or the day before the game, with time together, dinners together, and everything else that you can program.
Oh, and I should say I've been to some of these at Ohio State, and there's the big tailgate beforehand, and that's probably one of the most incredible things is like the advantage is you're getting. I mean, at that thing, I think we had 20-some people all in the same section, and so I actually didn't realize. I mean, it makes sense, but I didn't realize how much went on behind the scenes even after to improve on that experience. But when I heard you say this, I just wouldn't have. I mean, it makes perfect sense in hindsight, but the first thing I think most people are thinking is they're driving direct to consumer. But the reality is, when you guys made this decision, that wasn't even your. That was. Focus, I don't want to say it wasn't on the radar. Of course, it's always going to be on the radar. Brand recognition in general, and it helps the agencies and advisors and everybody else. But I would have definitely not realized how much that matters. And the reality is, for anybody that's been in this space knows your top brokers, your top advisors, your top firms, they're making up. I mean, it's disproportionate how much of how much revenue that they're bringing to you on a. So like, where my head goes is what an amazing way to get, because you're right. If they're a top broker, they're a top 100 broker. Let's just use insurance for this one. If they're a top 100 agency, odds are all the carriers have something really cool that they can bring them to or offer them or whatever that might be. But since you guys I'm going to use the word over-indexed on the NFL, nobody else can do that. Yeah, probably only they would have
not to the same level. And it goes back to your point on like why do the sponsorship. There are certain things as a sponsor you get access to that nobody gets access to unless you're a sponsor. Yeah. And so if you're in your category, you can do that. But your point is valid. We always talked about like these people can get invited to anything. How can we be special? Yeah, in some way. And so that is something the team thinks about.
Everybody's got the trip, right? I've been on a number of these trips, and they're all amazing. It doesn't matter if it's a small carrier, regional carrier, national carrier, super large carrier. They're all really, really, really cool experiences. Yeah. So like to have that as a separator when somebody else is, let's say, I always think of like where's Nationwide and like what spot are they in? Are they the top carrier with this? But are they number 2? Are they number 3? Are they way out of that? For those ones that you're number 3, the opportunity to go, they already like you to go to 2 or 1.
2 and 1. Yeah.
Is that how you guys kind of thought about that? Or
yeah, I mean, listen, like to do that well, the partnership with your sales, your people that are actually having these discussions out in the markets, like that's the feedback loop that's really important to getting the right people and the right environment to create the relationship. But yeah, I mean, so much of the activity, like we would work directly with business units they may have this group. And the one thing we found is smaller is really effective. Like you can do a 30-person or a 50-person thing. Sales teams love when you can get 6 to 8,
100%,
something like that. Like that's 100%. A sweet spot of like probably getting even, again, it's more economically viable, but you can probably get more out of that than you can the group of 30 because you're not necessarily building the depth of relationship that you can with 6 to 8. And so oftentimes a team would pivot to creating kind of smaller, intimate experiences, and you can do a lot with that.
What you can do at that with only 6 to 8 with even if the budget's half, it's going to be it would be like some of those unforgettable experiences. Really, that's amazing.
But let me circle back. You mentioned like your first question was around TUBA, total unaided brand awareness versus aided awareness. And so I mentioned early on that we achieved the highest brand metrics we'd ever achieved, and that was on the total unaided brand awareness side. And that's the more difficult metric to hit. I mean, you're talking about taking up real estate in someone's mind. Yeah. If you were to just unprompted say a brand in some ways, that's a harder metric to achieve. And when you're in direct to consumer, it takes tonnage of spend to be able to do that, share a voice and everything else. When we made this pivot, it became less about that, and this pivot being more of a B2B focus. When we made that pivot, it was more about how can we make sure this is a brand that is known and trusted. Again, the Nationwide is an almost 100-year-old company. It's really well known. It used to have a ton of exclusive agents, and it went more of the distribution of independent distribution route. But it still maintained very strong brand measures, and it was about how do you continue to nurture and protect the brand in a way that when an agent, a broker, a financial advisor sits across the desk from you and says, here's the company that I think you should work with, and it's a company they know, meaning their client in some way, their ability to say yes to that increases significantly when the brand is known and trusted. And so, that focus was really important, and the brand work that was done, the trust and reputation work that was done was really important to maintaining that, because oftentimes, as you know, oftentimes the brand is the difference. Yeah. The product features maybe aren't that different, pricing maybe isn't that different, but maybe I've put this brand in front of you that you have kind of heard of. Sure. Or this one where you're like, oh, yeah, I know that one.
Yeah, exactly.
So that can make a difference in not just the recommendation, but the acceptance from the client on the other side too.
Oh, it used to happen when I was an agent, it happened all the time. Yeah. If they've heard of this one but haven't heard of this one, it's a big deal. Yeah. And to your point, I have to like that company, right? Like
yeah.
there were some companies in the financial downturn that people were like, oh,
It's
I'm
not just awareness. I could be aware of you and hate you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I'm curious if somebody's going down this route, they've got a big partnership, whatever that might be. What are the hiccups they need to be aware of?
When you mean like the NFL?
Yeah, well, let's say it's the NFL, F1, it doesn't matter, whomever it might be. I would say those are still probably the hottest ones right now. But like, what are they? If they're going into this? What are the things that I would say that when you guys went into this, that you thought, oh, I didn't realize that, or like, I wish I actually would have thought about that differently. I know this really worked, and you guys hit momentum fast.
Yeah, I would say the team had to get really good at managing through reputational challenges. We were with the NFL at the time of national anthem. Yeah. Ray Rice. Mm-hmm. Concussions. Trying to think what else. I'm sure there's more. So but anyways, as a sponsor, you often have to have a voice in some ways. You often get asked for what's your perspective on this, and so you have to deal with reputational challenges, and not just with an entity like the NFL, but anytime you're using talent. Yeah. Anytime it's an individual, that individual may get into some sort of legal situation in which you have to respond in some way. So my advice would just be you have to have a really good process for how you triage these things that are happening. I mean, we had such trusted relationships with our legal partners, with PR, because we had to be able to get really good at knowing what to respond to and what not to. And the other piece of advice I would say is get really good at like no comment. You don't always have to participate in this. Mm-hmm. People are always going to want you to participate in it, but you don't always have to, right? Because at the end of the day, the job is to protect your brand. Yep. So I'd say anytime you're getting into deals at this kind of visibility and scale with talent or entities, is start thinking of the worst case scenarios that can happen. And we would think of the worst case scenarios. How would we respond? Who needs to be included? What are the different things to contemplate? And so we try to get really good at that muscle. I would say the second aspect is just how to get really good at understanding impact. Because again, like, what measurement tools are your C-suite leadership team, your finance folks gonna be okay with and understanding, are we getting value from this? I mean, a lot of companies and brands may think this is just like very flashy stuff. It's a bunch of upper funnel advertising. We don't get any lift from this. You have to be able to demonstrate that. And so do the due diligence on your brand tracking and your marketing mix modeling, and your connections with finance to be able to show, like, here's what we get from this. And the more that you do that, the more success you're going to have. And without that, you could be in and out of these things pretty quickly, because if spend has to get cut in some ways, maybe this is the first thing that goes, because I don't have the right measurement in place to be able to tell you what it's actually doing.
Absolutely.
And so I would say maybe those two things are, if I was giving any advice to people in this space, it's that.
Yeah, so reputation and finding a way to actually demonstrate
value,
working or not working, really. So, Brad, last question I got for you is, if you can have a conversation with your younger self, age totally up to you, what would that conversation be? What advice would you give that person?
Here's why it's relevant for me. My wife and I have 4 daughters. Mm-hmm. Oldest one just graduated college. Second one will graduate college next year. Mm-hmm. And our youngest are a set of twins who are going to be juniors in high school. So they probably feel like I give them too much advice at times. Because, like, listen, part of being a kid is, like, you kind of have to go do your thing and fail a little bit and then kind of come back. And so you want them to kind of do that. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe a couple things come to mind. Like, the first one is honestly just, like, outworking people. Mm-hmm. Like, if there was one thing I think I tried to do early in my career, and I would have people come in and say, it doesn't matter what time I get here, you're always here. And it doesn't matter what time I leave, you're still here. Yep. And so early in my career, like, I was definitely grinding and hustling, and that's a great time to do that. And that's what I would tell people, like, in your early 20s, you should be grinding like crazy to set up some sort of foundation to hopefully help pay you off whatever you want to do career-wise down the road. But the more you can hustle and grind, and just, it's crazy to think that how differentiating just outworking someone can be.
Oh, 100%.
There's a lot of people who aren't willing to do that.
Optics matter in that scenario. Yeah. If somebody sees that somebody's really putting in the effort, that's going to, like, even if you've got some dull, like if there's some areas where you're just not as strong at, they know that you'll probably work and you'll eventually get there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's an important one that just like, again, you can just, I'm not saying you gotta be the smartest person in the world. I certainly am not that. Like I think just at times you can just outwork people. Maybe the second thing is just naturally curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I was even telling people that, I mean, before I left Nationwide, like I think one of my best pieces of advice is like, just be curious. And like, we're at a time right now where you've never had more information readily accessible in seconds with depth than you do right now. And I would always tell my kid, I think at times you sit in meetings and people will talk about something and you have no idea what they're talking about. And I've been in those meetings.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point in my career when I was a chief of staff to our CMO and business unit president. And one of the functions that reported up to me at the time was our venture capital team, our corporate venture capital team. I didn't know anything about venture capital, but I was super interested in it. And I would sit in these meetings and they would use terms that I had no idea what they were talking about. And I'd write them down and then I would go study them later on and just try and get smart. And so that's what I always tell my kids. Like, they'll sit in meetings and say, like, Dad, I'm surrounded by people who are way smarter than me. I'm like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, use that as a little bit of a fire to kind of like get smart yourself on things that you're interested in. So I just being naturally curious.
Yeah.
Like, again, can be, I think, be a differentiator for so many people. And again, it's never been easier to do that. And then maybe the last piece would be relationships.
Yeah.
I think there are people who network just to kind of network, and it's like, let's get some coffee and do this. Like, there's, I think, really intentional ways to build relationships. And it was something I learned kind of later on. And like, not that I was not trying to, but I don't know if I had as much intentionality to it, to the point where, like, one of the things that I think people know about me is if I've mentored someone in some ways, I'll even share with them, like, I've got my own development plan, and I will share with them, like, here's exactly what I put down for myself. I use like the last 2 weeks of December to kind of think about, in this next calendar year, what am I trying to get done?
Yeah.
What am I trying to achieve? And I used to be the guy who was like, my 5-year plan is this and my 10-year plan is this. And then I was just like, man, there's just so much that's going to change. What's my 1-year plan kind of look like? And that was another piece that kind of evolved throughout my career. I used to be so like, here's my 10-year plan. And I just kind of blew that up. But my 1-year plan became my way. And as part of that was like, what's my relationship strategy in the next year?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people that I want to have dinner with, have drinks with, go have coffee with, spend time, pick their brain, and hopefully like build an actual relationship that can be used when you need it. And need it just mean like, you might have a question.
100%.
You might need someone to bounce something off of.
Yep.
You might need somebody that says, listen, I really messed this up and I could use your help in some way. And so, I think the more that you can be intentional about building those reciprocating relationships, like, the payoff is huge.
But, what I'd add to that too, and you touched on this a little bit, is that intentionality piece. As you move up the ladder, a lot of people want to meet with you.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to meet with you all the time. And then you start to build a reputation for whether that's like, for me, it was as a sales executive within startups. And so people, whenever somebody was like looking for that job or whatever that might be, I'd get it. And I took all those calls. And because I always wanted to help people out, I was just burning myself out. And it's not that I didn't want to help. I did want to help. And that's the hardest part, probably, is the guilt of like, oh, I gotta say no. But the reality is, you do have to say no because you have to make room. Like, everybody
kind of knows their limit.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wired the same way. Like, I was honored that people thought enough about me that they wanted to meet with me or have my advice in some way. One of the ways I always use that would kind of like naturally weed out things too is I would always put it on them. Like, come, like, if you want the time, come prepared, and I'm going to give you things to do. Do the things. If you don't do the things,
that's a good idea.
If you don't do the things, then you're not really serious about this relationship in any way. And so that was another way to kind of like weed out how serious is someone in terms of actually wanting to build a relationship with you in some way, is give them something to do and see if they actually do it or not. But I always tried to be generous with time. I learned that from leaders who gave it to me, and so I tried to reciprocate as much as I possibly could. But everyone knows their limit in terms of like, I can't take on 17 mentorship meetings a week.
It's like you can't. It's exactly it. And definitely keep space for some of those if that's important to you. If it's not important to you, don't feel like you have to do it just to do it. But for me, like, it is. But like, I had to put a limit on it. And again, that was hard, but it's one of the best things I did.
Yeah.
Because then because otherwise I'm not showing up at home. I'm not it becomes a problem.
1,000%. I mean, I think you're hitting on a different point, which is like, at the end of the day, you still have to manage yourself, your time, and everything else, because there's a lot of people that need you in some way. Your people at work need you, and your people away from work need you too in some ways. And so if you don't balance or optimize that, then nothing is. And in fact, everything suffers. Yep. And so sounds like you figured that out. Which is the right,
try. Like
which is the right
I'm
thing
working
to do.
on figuring it out. I would not say I've got it figured out.
Yeah.
But Brad, this was awesome, man. I'm glad we can get this, and this was so much fun. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed our episode with Brad. I could talk about the NFL and these major campaigns and breaking these down all day long. If you want to learn more about Brad, you can find him on LinkedIn in the show notes. If you got any feedback or want to contact me, you can also feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. And if you really want to support the show, a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify is very much appreciated. And please give us a like or a comment or a follow on YouTube. So with that, we'll see everybody next week.